25 years ago, on this special day, I started asking the people of Tullahoma to pause as we salute the men and women who have served our country with honor and distinction. Alderman Jimmy Blanks, Dr. Duncan, Renee Cain, Ray Norris, Jerry Mathis, and Robin Dunn join me in saluting all those who have served. When you take part in America today, you build a better America for tomorrow. And when you honor those who gave their yesterdays in defense of our country, you honor the very best of what men and women can be. And when you give your dedication and devotion to the commitment of being a citizen of this country, you make America a living memorial to their service and to their sacrifices. The liberties we enjoy are precious gifts, protected only for the moment and require a constant vigil. They will most certainly be lost should we ever turn our backs on those who serve in our defense. Today we will attempt to deliver remarks that do justice to the deeds of both the living and the dead. Veterans Day is meant to be commemorated both solemnly and joyfully, a day to renew our collective pride and rejoice in our freedom, a day to remember our glorious and costly heritage, and to make it work for an even more glorious and prosperous future. Today is our opportunity to salute the men and women who have served or are serving in the armed forces to preserve our freedoms, and the men and women who died serving our country. There is not a person in our great country who has not been touched by a family or friend serving in the armed forces and are now enjoying the freedoms those of the friends or family members defended. Who are our veterans? They're men and women who feel an extra heart tug when the flag goes by. They love peace because they know the price of war and the price of freedom. They will always remain America's most honored citizens. They're our veterans. America, home of the free, because of the brave. Everyone that's able, please stand as the colors are posted and remain standing for the pledge and prayer. Thank you for being here today.
Salute. Color guard. Advance.
God, we turn to you in this hour, mindful of the men and women who have served and who continue to serve our great nation through our armed forces, for the unsung heroes of our nation who have risked their lives or have even given their lives for the freedoms that we share today. We praise you for their courage, their unwavering commitment, for their service. For our veterans who are lonely, who've been displaced in our world today. For those in a VA, a hospital, a nursing home, tend to them as you have promised, assuring them that you are their good shepherd and great physician. For those who continue to serve, we give you thanks. Bless the men and women who serve within our borders, those that are scattered throughout the world. Especially, we pray for those who are in hot spots throughout the world, that you would protect them and keep them from all harm and danger. For those, O Lord, who have lost a loved one, father, son, daughter, that you bind up the brokenhearted with your comfort, with your peace, with your strength, and give to each of us here today wisdom and strength to serve you and to serve our nation with true dedication and with honesty. We ask these things in the name of Jesus Christ, your only Son, our Lord. Amen. Amen.
We are here today to honor those who gave their all, those who gave their lives, those who were sent to shore by boat, jumped from a plane, lived underwater or on a ship, those who stayed on the home shore guarding our land. Whether you serve by land or air or sea, you did it for me. For that, you and I can live in a land of the free, free to speak, worship, live, work, play. To those men and women through their efforts then and those now gave us these freedoms, so many I could not begin to count. To say thank you to you who served our country and to those who are still serving is not nearly enough. Yes, let us thank them. But let us also serve by exercising our right to vote. Honor our flag because of what it represents. Let us be willing to share a smile or give our time and help to those who can no longer help themselves. Therefore, on behalf of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, Tullahoma chapter, we thank you, we honor you. God has already blessed us today by being able to be, to borrow a statement. We kneel at the cross. We stand for our flag. We stand for you. Thank you, and may God bless you.
Good morning. This poem is especially dedicated to the following World War II veterans I have known. Mr. William Bryant, U.S. Army, combat, Normandy, deceased. Mr. Clifford Allison, U.S. Army, just as of yesterday, he was in the hospital with praying for his recovery. Mr. William Keesley, U.S. Navy, deceased. Mr. Lewis Curtis, U.S. Army, Buffalo soldier, combat in the Philippines. Mr. Herbert Ensel, U.S. Army, combat, Normandy, deceased. Mr. Thomas Wynn, our local hero, sitting right here. Mr. Wynn was a U.S. Army Ranger. He did combat at Normandy and Korea, and probably everywhere else there was a war going on. He's just a world-class hero, local and national. We thank him for his service, especially. Today's poem is called Freedom Will Light the Way. Since the beginning of time on earth, when God separated the darkness from light, since the first sin committed by man, there have been battles, wars to fight. Today, let us vow to remember forever, with humble gratitude and dedication, to hold a permanent place in our hearts for all who courageously serve this great nation. Let us remember never to forget how children transformed when their nation called, how they prepared to give all it took, while many gave some gave all. And though death laid his claim on many, that claim will not stand for those who believe, for all who die in Jesus' name will rise and live for eternity. Every man, every woman, every boy and girl who has served this nation in some small way has helped to make her the land that she is and the leader she is of the world today. There are heroes that walk among us each day, and though none are born as such, a hero is one that outlasts the opponents, the one still standing when all others give up. There will always be wars to fight in this life. Injustice and evil will never give in. But as long as we're one nation under God, those on the Lord's side always win. We honor you and we appreciate you, just how much heaven only knows. But we live in the greatest nation because you helped to make it so. The struggle for freedom goes on and will until this world comes to its end. Even God knows freedom will never be free until time is no more and eternity begins. The path and fate of any great nation depends on its guidance, strength, and its might. Freedom and the plight of their destiny are trophies for those who went to fight. We each been enlisted to be a soldier in a war that's fought day after day. Through vigilance, truth, and with God on our side, keep freedom out front. It will light the way. And one last thing as I part, I'd like to leave you with this harsh reality. Every patriotic message ends with God bless America. We need him now more than ever before, but I find it odd. We limit him through political correctness and exclude him from so much. America is time we bless God. God bless you and God keep you. Know that love will always conquer, and God bless America.
Yonder, climbing high in the sky.
I worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. I thank the Lord above for living here today, 'cause this flag still stands for freedom, and you can't take that away.
It is my honor to be here before you today to introduce Colonel Scott A. Cain, United States Air Force. But before I list his vast accomplishments, I believe it is fitting to speak for a moment about this year's Veterans Day theme, featured on your program. Abraham Lincoln's quote, "To care for him who shall have borne the battle," from his second inaugural address, came just 4 weeks before the surrender of General Lee and just 5 weeks before the assassination of President Lincoln. His inaugural address was one of concern and a recount of the horrors of the wars and the struggles to preserve our country. Yet it ends with a note of hope for veterans, imploring that we remain grateful for all of those who have served, and a challenge to care for veterans and their families, and to strive for peace. He said, "With malice toward none, with charity for all." Firmness in the right as God gives us to see it the right, let us strive to finish the work that we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who has borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, and to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. For many years, our region has played an important part in the nation's security. Colonel Scott A. Cain, commander of Arnold Engineering Development Complex just 8 miles from this spot, is leading more than 3,000 personnel, working in more than 55 aerospace testing facilities in 9 locations spread across 6 states. He is leading America's test and evaluation work on breakthrough technologies for our national security, hoping to achieve a lasting peace on this planet. Colonel Cain was commissioned United States Air Force Academy class of 1995, where he was a distinguished graduate. Earning a Bachelor of Science in Aerospace Engineering, after pilot training, he was selected to fly the F-16, the Flying Falcon. He served at Busan Air Base in Korea and Miyasawa Air Base in Japan, flying combat missions in support of Operation Southern Watch over Iraq. He also served as an F-117A Nighthawk pilot at Pullman Air Force Base, home of our first stealth fighter. In 2005, Colonel Cain attended the premier United States Air Force Test Pilot School. He served as a developmental pilot. He is a command pilot with more than 2,800 hours, flying 29 aircraft, including the F-16, the F-117, and our nation's newest stealth fighter, the F-35. Colonel Cain also worked as an Air Force Fellow at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, an incredible innovation ecosystem that includes academic, cooperative, governmental partners dedicated to creating new strategic opportunities and novel tactic operations for the United States. These innovations have included not only game-changing military capabilities, such as precision weapons and stealth technology, but also icons of civilian society as the internet, voice recognition, language translation, and global positioning system receivers, which you find in your phone and other communication devices. Colonel Cain commanded the 40th Test Flight Squadron at Elgin Air Force Base. He also served with the Office of Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Development, Test, and Evaluation. He comes to Arnold after successful command of the 412th Operations Group, Edwards Air Force Base. His experience and expertise in testing and applying new capabilities to critical national security assets brought him to Arnold Air Force Base as the commander of AEDC this past July. We welcome him and his wife, Michelle, their 2 children to our city. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished guest speaker, Colonel Cain.
Well, good morning, and thank you for inviting me to join you on Veterans Day. On behalf of Arnold Air Force Base, Major General David Harris, the Air Force Flight Test Center Commander, General Ellen Polakowski, the Air Force Materiel Command Commander, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and the Secretary of the Air Force, Senior Master Sergeant Chuck Hoyt, and I'd like to thank you for supporting our veterans, my veterans, who live in this community. Thank you for supporting all the veterans from our Army National Guard and from all the service men and women who live in this great community. And thank you for supporting Arnold Air Force Base, which exists to make sure our aerospace power, which is relied upon by all the armed forces, is the best in the world. For decades, our troops in harm's way have had air superiority, protecting them from enemy attack from the sky. This is something not all of our allies can ensure, and certainly something not enjoyed by our adversaries. And now we look for that same superiority in space and cyberspace to ensure our forces' victory and to bring our veterans home. Today is not, however, so much about the wars of the future as it is about the wars of the past and the present, and those brave Americans who've gone into harm's way. Veterans Day is about something sacred. I think we as Americans have changed the way we approach Veterans Day over the years, and I want to simply share with you how I view this day. It's something sacred. and it's about our veterans, but it was originally about when wars stopped. It was to remember the tragedy of war, whether necessary or not tragic. The warriors don't all fare well, even if war is won. It's something we need to remember, and it will help us focus on what those veterans have really given in our wars. It's something sacred, something to be treated with reverence, with respect. They've given themselves. On November 11th, 1918, an armistice was signed in France, between the Allies and Germany to stop fighting on the Western Front in World War I. It took effect at 11 o'clock in the morning, the famous 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918. The U.S. and many allies recognized the first Armistice Day on November 11, 1919. President Woodrow Wilson said that our reflections should be filled with solemn pride, in the heroism of those who died in the country's service and with gratitude for victory. It wasn't until 1938 that Armistice Day was officially a U.S. holiday, but it was celebrated in this nation for over 30 years. After World War II, Randall Weeks, a World War II veteran from nearby Alabama, promoted the idea of expanding Armistice Day to recognize all veterans, not just those who died in World War I. It took until 1954 for it to become law, but that year Armistice Day became Veterans Day, and it has been ever since. It's a day to recognize all those who served in the armed forces. But Veterans Day was born from the 11th hour of the 11th day, the 11th month, 1918. 99 years ago. We'll probably hear more about it next year at 100, but every year I think about Veterans Day and our veterans in terms of Armistice Day and when wars stop. About Wilson's solemn pride in our heroes and about his gratitude for the victory. What I see is gratitude that it has stopped, hopefully in our favor. When war stops, some come home. You probably heard this parable. World War II veterans returned to parades and celebrations across the nation. Vietnam veterans returned to a different atmosphere. Instead of returning to the parades and being treated as heroes, they were in many cases uncared for upon return. In the worst cases, received with anger. It wasn't until the 1980s that Americans started to see that even if the war was unpopular, people fighting it should not be. Today, our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen are generally treated well and appreciated for their sacrifice and the risks they took, even by those who don't like the wars they're fighting in. We've learned not to take the politics of war out on our veterans. But when a battle pauses or stops, or you're back from a mission, or your tour is over, or you're back in the world, a veteran has changed, and sometimes their battles continue. Some of our current wars have raged for decades. For the Air Force, we've been flying in combat 24/7 for more than 25 years since Desert Storm. There's a takeoff and landing every 2.8 minutes today, 60 combat lines every day, 2,300 command and control sorties every month, 40,000 airdrop munitions annually, and 21,000 airmen currently deployed. And this pace has taken a toll on our equipment and our veterans. I flew in this decades-long presence in the skies of Iraq, as we heard. And though I don't purport to have experienced the war the same as my brothers and sisters on the ground, I do know how it feels to go across the line into combat and then have it stop. I do know the anonymity of coming back into the world and walking among those who've been safe at home while I was across that line. What I don't know is the experience of going home at night as our airmen who operate aircraft remotely around the world experience. 1 hour flying their aircraft in combat, and the next hour back in their home. These operators are supporting the front lines with intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and weapon strikes from within our nation's borders. The real effects of this on their health is still not clear. Those operations do not cease, and based on how the U.S. Air Force and our armed forces remain engaged worldwide in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, patrolling our own borders, will continue to be in combat for the foreseeable future. This is a way of war, a type of continuous combat that just doesn't stop for our nation, but it does for veterans when they finish their mission, when they come home. Our Guard and Reserve units have made up about 50% of our forces deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan. Since September 11th, the Army National Guard has mobilized over 500,000 soldiers. At one point, in 2005, half our combat brigades deployed in Iraq came from the Army National Guard. The Army has also relied heavily on the Army Reserve since September 11th. Since then, more than 280,000 Army Reserve soldiers have been mobilized to support the active Army in global operations. Like the Army, the Air Force has depended heavily on its Air Guard component since September 11th. The Air National Guard performs 30% of worldwide Air Force missions each day, including the majority of our continental air defense. The Navy and Marine Reserve have served similarly in the last 25 years of war. Now, when our veterans stop, when the war stops for them, they do so for several reasons. Some reach the end of the tour, some don't. We've lost 5,419 killed in action since September 11th. Some have visible wounds, some are invisible. In conflicts since 2001, including Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom and other ongoing operations, the U.S. Armed Forces have suffered 52,627 wounded in action. And there are invisible wounds for many more. Studies have estimated that as many as 800,000 Vietnam veterans suffered from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. We thought that limiting tours of duty would limit PTSD, but even after generally a tour lasting a year, PTSD symptoms hit about 25 to 35% of the troops. That's what we see today. Almost all experience symptoms immediately, and they subside after a few months, but then the same number, 25 to 35%, don't fully recover, and they need help. Another study by Congress in 2013 put the number at 44% of troops returning from Iraq and Afghanistan had difficulties. 1 in 5 had PTSD. 1 in 5 suffered from traumatic brain injuries. So as wars stop for the nations involved and for the history books, they don't for our veterans. This is something sacred, something solemn. Often only they feel, that their families feel, it's very real. So what can we do today, this Veterans Day, and what should we do other days when there isn't all this fanfare? Well, remember our wounded warriors. There's certainly programs like the Wounded Warrior Project that can use your help as individuals or through our local organizations to raise funds and raise awareness for the needs of our wounded warriors. You can also say thanks. We veterans do appreciate that, but be willing to hear our stories too. Remember, we did this for you, for service, for our nation. And most veterans are humble and private about their experiences. They simply won't tell you about them unless you're willing to ask and willing to listen. I think if more of us took the fraction of time it takes, that little extra step of just asking, what did you do in the Air Force? Or on your deployment with the National Guard? We would become more aware of our veterans and their sacrifices. We'd be better at understanding this part of our society, and we'd be better adjusting as a culture to understand what our wars really mean. And then finally, to hold on to our perspective about what our wars really mean on Veterans Day and what it really means to our veterans. Remember 11/11/1918, the 11th hour, the 11th day, 99 years ago, Armistice Day. Veterans Day is a great opportunity to recognize our veterans, to volunteer some time to veterans' causes, to take the time to ask, but most importantly, remember, it's about when wars stop. About being thankful for the peace that has come and caring for those who brought it. Our veterans are patriots. They're fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles, aunts, and friends. And they are to be recognized today. Thank you, and God bless America.
they're filing off, I want to do something special right here. As Mayor Curley said earlier, this is about celebration. I personally want to give all of you a round of applause. You made it. You found your way here today, and I wish that everyone in our nation had an opportunity to go through the experience that we're able to go through in this room, because every experience you have in life changes you just a little bit. One of the biggest life-changing experiences that I know of, is other than marriage, is military service. And no matter what you did, where you went, how you came back, very few came through it unchanged. I wrote this in dedication to wounded warriors. Thank you, Colonel, for the segue. A young warrior stands in an ill wind. The battle rages on without him. The leader of men, both tall and strong, now fights with the moment where dreams are gone. A chill determination shines in his eyes, but the enemy no longer fears his battle cries. His heart and his will still scream out for more, but the legs that he stands on can't take him to war. His comrades in combat still march glory bound as he fights with the feeling that he let them down. But there's strength in the fact that they still hold his dreams, and they find inspiration each time he screams. A young warrior stands in an ill wind and dreams of the day when he fights again. The enemy will change. He must wait and see. But no matter what battle, a warrior he'll be. Yes, the enemy changes. That's life's way, you see. But no matter the battle, a warrior he'll be. Thank all of you for the warrior that you are. In the style of my grandfather, Odie Lee Tidwell, a blind Appalachian guitar player by the name of Doc Watson, and the schooling of Sacred Heart, I bring you faithful soldiers. Oh, when shall I see Jesus and reign with him above? And from that flowing fountain drink everlasting love. When shall I be delivered from this vain world of sin? And with my blessed Savior drink endless pleasures in. Now I am but a soldier, my captain's gone before. He has given me my orders and bid me ne'er give o'er. His promises are faithful, a righteous crown he'll give, and all his valiant soldiers eternally shall live. When you meet with troubles and trials on your way, then cast your cares on Jesus,
And don't forget to pray. Gird on the gospel's armor of hope and faith and love. And when the combat's ended, he'll take you home above.
Thanks everyone for being here today, especially our veterans. We honor you for your service. Special thanks to Frank Ray for the use of the building. Please, all the veterans that are here, please be sure that we have, especially prepared for you as you leave. And ask everyone, please join us for reception in the reception room. Thanks again for being here, and thanks to all of our presenters for a job well done. Thank you.